The atmosphere in Mr. Will's calculus class was unusually light for a Friday afternoon. Spring break was just a week away, and even the grueling march through derivatives and integrals couldn't dampen the excitement in the air. Mr. Wills had ditched the lecture in favor of a game, a rare treat that made everyone a little more energetic, a little more careless. Laughter bounced off the walls, mingling with the rhythmic scratching of pencils and the occasional groan of defeat. I remember glancing out the window, watching a few stray petals from the cherry blossoms drift lazily to the ground. The world outside seemed calm, ordinary. It was the last moment of peace I'd feel that day. The intercom clicked on, and the dean's voice cut through the classroom. "This is a lockdown. This is not a drill. Teachers, secure your rooms immediately." The room froze. A ripple of confusion passed through the class, a half-second of disbelief before Mr. Wills sprang into action. "Everyone to the corner. Now, no talking." His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed him. He locked the door, drew the shades, and flipped off the lights, plunging us into semi-darkness. I felt the energy in the room shift, a silent crackling panic spreading like wildfire. We huddled together in the farthest corner of the room, knees to chests, shoulders pressed tightly. My pulse thundered in my ears as I clutched my phone, the screen illuminating my trembling hands. Then, from somewhere down the hall, a man's voice shattered the stillness. "Where is she? Where is she?" The scream was guttural, raw like an animal in pain. It echoed off the tile floors, reverberating through the silent halls. My stomach dropped as I heard the pounding, fists slamming against metal doors, one after another. The man's voice rose again, a slurred mix of rage and desperation, each word sharper and louder than the last. We held our breath as the noise grew closer. I could feel the person next to me trembling, their shoulders shaking uncontrollably. Mr. Wills pressed his finger to his lips, his eyes darting to the door. And then it came. Bang, bang, bang. The man was at our door. The sound was deafening, the force so strong it rattled the flimsy walls. "Open the door!" he roared, his voice cracking under the strain. "I know you're in there." Someone let out a small gasp, a barely audible sound, but it was enough. The man banged again, harder this time. The door shook, the handle rattling violently as he tried to force it open. "Shut up," someone hissed, their voice trembling. "Please, shut up." But it was too late. One of the girls near the back of the group lost it. She screamed, a piercing, uncontrollable wail of pure terror that seemed to echo endlessly in the small, dark room. The banging stopped for a moment, as if the man were listening. "Found you," he whispered, the words chillingly clear through the thin door. My heart felt like it would burst. I closed my eyes, praying he'd move on. I could hear someone quietly sobbing, muffling the sound into their knees. Mr. Wills stood frozen, his back against the wall, his hand still gripping the door lock. We were trapped, powerless. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the noise stopped. The banging, the shouting. It all receded into the distance, leaving a vacuum of silence that was almost worse. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. No one moved. No one dared to breathe. The intercom crackled again. "Students, remain in lockdown. The intruder has left the hallways but has not been located. Stay where you are." The relief was fleeting. He wasn't found. My mind raced with possibilities. Where had he gone? Was he outside, waiting? Could he come back? My hands shook as I clutched my phone tighter, refreshing the news page over and over with no updates. We stayed there for what felt like an eternity, pressed against one another in suffocating silence. Eventually, the dean's voice came back on. "The lockdown has been lifted. Teachers, please escort your students to a safe location." Safe. The word felt hollow. Mr. Wills instructed us to line up quietly. His voice was hoarse, shaky. We crept out into the hallway, which felt eerily empty despite the murmurs of other classes filing out of their rooms. I couldn't stop glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see the man lurching out of the shadows. Once we were gathered in the gym, the dean gave us the full story. The intruder was a mentally unstable man who had wandered onto campus, assaulting the front desk staff before storming the hallways. He was screaming about someone, a person none of us knew, claiming they were hiding in the school. He disappeared during the initial police sweep, and no one knew where he went. Hours later, the janitor found him. He'd wedged himself into a storage closet near the boiler room. What's worse, they believed he was armed. By the time the police were notified, he'd escaped. No one saw him leave. No one knew where he went. I don't remember much of the ride home that day. My mom hugged me tighter than she ever had before, but I could barely register her words. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the sound of the banging on our door. His voice, that horrible whisper, "Found you." The man was never caught, not officially. Rumors swirled for weeks. Some said he was seen near a gas station miles away. Others claimed he was hiding in the woods. But he was gone, and the uncertainty left a scar on all of us. For months, I jumped at every loud noise, every creak of a door. Even now, years later, I can't walk down a school hallway without hearing the phantom echo of his fists on the door. And every now and then, in the dead of night, I hear his voice in my dreams. "Found you." I never thought I'd find myself back in the basement of my old high school, let alone under such harrowing circumstances. It was supposed to be a simple internship, a chance to gain experience in IT while helping modernize the school's outdated systems. Instead, it became the most horrifying night of my life, one that left scars I'll carry forever. It was a dreary Friday evening, the type where time seems to stretch on endlessly. The school was mostly empty, save for a few teachers grading papers upstairs. I was alone in the basement office, immersed in the glow of a computer screen, troubleshooting a network issue. The hum of the server room offered a false sense of security, a monotonous rhythm that lulled me into complacency. Then the intercom crackled to life. "All staff and students, this is a lockdown. This is not a drill. Lock your doors and remain quiet." The voice was steady, but I could hear the undercurrent of fear. My heart slammed against my ribs. A lockdown? At this hour? I bolted to the door and locked it, pulling the shade down over the small window. The room suddenly felt suffocating. I grabbed my phone, scrolling through messages in a frenzy. Then the call came. "There's an armed intruder in the building," said a voice I recognized as the school's principal. "Stay put and don't make a sound. We've called the police." Armed intruder. The words echoed in my head, turning my veins to ice. I crouched behind the desk, clutching my phone like a lifeline. My breathing was shallow, my hands trembling. The minutes dragged by in agonizing silence. Then came the sound of footsteps. They weren't hurried or frantic, just slow, deliberate, and far too close for comfort. My stomach twisted as the doorknob rattled. The lock held, but then came the knock. 3 steady raps. "Hello? Is someone in there?" A man's voice, calm and low. "Please, I need help." Every instinct screamed at me to stay silent, but something in his tone unsettled me. My heart hammered as I peeked out from behind the desk. A man stood at the window, his face partially obscured by the dim light. He didn't look like a teacher or staff member, but he wasn't wearing anything overtly threatening either. No ski mask, no camouflage, just a pale button-up shirt and slacks. "Please," he repeated, softer this time. "I'm a parent. I was visiting the school when the lockdown started. I'm hiding from the intruder." The rational part of my brain wanted to believe him, but something about his demeanor didn't sit right. He wasn't panicked, not the way someone would be in such a situation. He was too composed, too calculated. I hesitated, and that hesitation saved my life. My phone buzzed, the vibration loud in the oppressive silence. I scrambled to silence it, glancing at the notification. It was a text from the principal. Asterisk description of the intruder. Male, mid-40s, white button-up shirt, dark slacks. Armed and dangerous. Asterisk. I froze, the text burning itself into my mind. My gaze snapped back to the man at the window. He was staring directly at me now, his lips curving into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Open the door," he said, his voice sharp now, the pretense of friendliness evaporating. My pulse roared in my ears as I backed away from the desk, my hand instinctively clutching the edge of the chair for support. "No," I whispered, the word barely audible. His smile widened, and then, with a swift motion, he drew a gun from his waistband. The sight of it sent a jolt of pure terror through me. My survival instincts kicked in. I bolted toward the far side of the room, yanking open the door to the server closet. The moment I moved, the deafening crack of a gunshot rang out, the bullet shattering the glass window of the office door. I dove into the server closet, slamming the door shut behind me. The space was cramped, filled with cables and humming machines. My chest heaved as I struggled to keep quiet. I heard the office door creak open, followed by slow, deliberate footsteps. He was inside. "Come out, kid," he called, his voice light, almost playful. "I just want to talk." I clamped a hand over my mouth, tears streaming down my face as I tried to stifle my breathing. The footsteps grew louder, closer. I braced myself, praying the flimsy door would hold. Then, a distant sound, the wail of sirens. He heard it too. There was a pause, and then his footsteps retreated. I waited, heart pounding, until I heard the distant thud of the main doors upstairs being forced open. Summoning every ounce of courage, I crept out of the server closet and dashed toward the stairs. As I emerged into the hallway, chaos erupted. Police officers stormed in, shouting commands. The man, now cornered, raised his weapon, but the officers were faster. He was subdued, wrestled to the ground as I watched from the shadows, trembling and pale. In the aftermath, the truth came to light. The intruder was a disgruntled parent with a vendetta against one of the teachers. He had come to settle a personal score, armed and ready to do irreparable harm. Thankfully, the teacher had been evacuated safely, and no lives were lost. But the scars of that night remain. Even now, years later, I can still hear the echo of that gunshot. I can still see his cold smile, the glint of the weapon in his hand. That basement, once a mundane part of my daily routine, has become a place I can't revisit. It stands as a reminder of how quickly life can change, of how close I came to losing everything. Some nights I dream of the footsteps, slow, deliberate, relentless, and I wake up, gasping for air, grateful to be alive. Rain streaked the cafeteria windows, a rhythmic patter against the glass that made the gray October day feel even gloomier. Inside, the air buzzed with the chatter of middle schoolers eager to escape the monotony of class for at least 30 minutes. Trays clattered, laughter rang out, and the occasional shout punctuated the chaos. I sat with my friends at our usual table, trying to make sense of soggy tater tots while ignoring the storm outside. Then came the first boom. It wasn't the kind of thunder you'd expect on a rainy day. It was sharper, angrier, like a crack of something heavy breaking apart. The cafeteria fell silent for a moment, a collective pause as everyone turned to the windows. The rain blurred our view, but nothing looked out of the ordinary. Someone muttered, "Thunder," and the noise of the cafeteria resumed, though quieter now. A second boom followed, and then a third, and a fourth. This time, the silence lingered, heavy and suffocating. Whispers rippled through the room. Kids exchanged nervous glances. I remember someone saying, "That's not thunder," and my stomach sank. The storm outside had nothing to do with the sound. Before anyone could make sense of it, the cafeteria doors burst open. Security guards rushed in, their faces grim. "Everyone up now," one of them barked, their usual calm replaced with urgency. "We're moving to the multipurpose room. Leave your trays. Don't ask questions. Move." Panic surged through the crowd as kids scrambled to their feet. My heart pounded as I followed the flow of students into the hallway, the atmosphere crackling with fear. The multipurpose room wasn't far, but every step felt agonizingly slow, like wading through quicksand. The guards herded us in, shutting the doors behind us. The room was lined with glass walls, and I realized too late that they offered no protection from whatever was happening outside. "Cover the windows," a guard ordered, motioning to a teacher. Curtains were drawn hastily, plunging the room into a dim twilight. The rain outside continued to pound, a relentless backdrop to the growing tension. Whispers filled the air, questions we were too afraid to ask aloud. Asterisk, what's happening? Are we safe? Was it gunfire? Asterisk. Then, the announcement came over the intercom. "This is a lockdown. Teachers, secure your rooms. Students, remain silent and follow instructions." The robotic calm of the voice sent chills down my spine. My friends and I huddled together on the floor, our backs pressed against the wall. Someone was crying softly nearby, their muffled sobs a reminder of how little any of us understood. It didn't take long for rumors to start swirling. A seventh grader swore they'd seen someone outside with a gun. Another claimed there was a fight in the parking lot. But it wasn't until a teacher's voice, low and shaky, whispered to another adult that we began to piece the truth together. The man who lived near the school, the one everyone called Mr. Creepy, had barricaded himself in his house. He'd been acting strange for weeks, yelling at kids who walked by, leaving bizarre notes taped to his mailbox. During Halloween, he'd scrawled threats in blood on his window. The police had been called before, but nothing came of it. Now he was threatening violence, and the 4 booms we'd heard were confirmed to be gunshots from his home. I remember the way my throat tightened at the mention of his name. Everyone in the neighborhood knew about him, the registered sex offender who kept to himself but always seemed to be watching. My mom had warned me to avoid his street, but it hadn't seemed real then, just another parental caution to ignore. Now, sitting on the cold floor of the multipurpose room, the reality of the situation sank in. Time dragged on. Every sound outside made us flinch, the wail of sirens, the occasional shout. Teachers whispered furiously in the corner, their faces pale and drawn. One of the security guards stood by the door, his hand hovering over the radio clipped to his vest. He glanced at us occasionally, his expression unreadable but not reassuring. An hour passed, maybe more. Felt like an eternity. Eventually, the intercom crackled again. "Lockdown lifted. Students, return to your classrooms." The words should have been comforting, but they weren't. We moved like ghosts, shuffling silently down the halls. Outside, through the rain-streaked windows, I caught a glimpse of flashing blue and red lights. Police officers swarmed the street near Mr. Creepy's house, their silhouettes blurred by the downpour. I couldn't see him, but I didn't need to. The image of his blood-scrawled threats was enough to haunt me. Back in the classroom, our teacher tried to resume the lesson, but no one was paying attention. The tension lingered, a shadow that refused to lift. Some kids were still crying. Others stared blankly at their desks. I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd narrowly escaped something far worse. In the days that followed, the details trickled in. The man had fired his gun into the air, screaming incoherently about payback for imagined slights. He'd been taken into custody, but no one felt safe knowing how close he'd come to following through on his threats. Parents pulled their kids out of school for the rest of the week. Police cars patrolled the area for days, but the unease never fully faded. Even now, years later, that rainy October day stays with me. The sound of thunder makes my chest tighten. I avoid walking past his old house, even though it's been sold and remodeled. And sometimes, late at night, I think about the man sitting alone in his dark home, plotting his revenge on a world that had long since left him behind. And I wonder, if the lockdown had lasted just a little longer, what might have happened? The 3 stories you just heard are more than tales of terror. They're stark reminders of how fragile our sense of safety can be. These moments of fear and chaos show us the power of resilience, of finding strength in ourselves and in those around us when the unimaginable happens. If these stories gripped you, left you on the edge of your seat, or made you reflect on the unexpected moments that can change everything, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you won't miss more stories that will keep you thinking long after the screen goes dark. Stay safe and we'll see you in the next video.